Welcome to our tutorial about working with AutoCAD's grid. In a previous tutorial, we learned how to turn the grid on and off using the toggle in the status bar. Now, as you can see, my grid looks different. It's only covering a small portion of my drawing area, not the whole screen like it usually does. That's because I've got what's called the grid limit turned on. AutoCAD lets you set the dimensions of the grid as well as turning the grid limit on and off. You might be wondering how this could be a useful feature. Let me give you an example. Let's say you create some geometry in model space. You might want to see how it looks when you print it on a piece of paper, so you need to size the grid appropriately. Let's see how we can adjust the grid settings. Just right-click on the grid toggle, scroll to Settings, and let's go to the Snap and Grid tab, the first tab. On the left, we have some snap options. On the right are the grid options. Snap spacing in the X and Y directions is set to the value 0.5. And as you see, grid spacing is also set to 0.5. These values are usually equal to each other or a multiple of the other. For example, if snap is equal to 0.5, we can make the grid 1 unit or 1.5 units, some multiple of 0.5. Let's restore to 0.5. Down below, we've got the major line set to appear every 5 minor lines. As you see in model space, there are 5 little squares in each direction of the big square. Under snap type, we can use rectangular or polar snap. And we can display the grid beyond the limit by checking this option. Let's click OK. OK, right-click back to Settings. Snap and Grid tab. Let's uncheck that option and turn Snap on by checking up here. Click OK. Let me zoom in a little bit and activate the Line tool. And as you see, my cursor snaps every half a unit, which is reflected in the status bar. This is a very convenient and fast way to create geometry. Let's right-click and enter to close the tool. To set the dimensions of the grid limit, type limits in the command line and press Enter. AutoCAD asks for the lower left corner. Let's enter coordinates. Let's say 0, 0, press Enter. Now we're asked to specify the upper right corner. Let's select a point in model space. Notice I'm beyond the grid limits, but Snap is still working. Left-click right about here, and here's our new grid limit. Another way to work with limits is via the Zoom tool. Let's select Zoom to All. AutoCAD zooms to the limits of the grid. When I double-click on my middle mouse button or wheel, Zoom to Extents is activated, which is when your model is maximized in the available screen space. If we draw something outside the limits and use the Zoom to All tool, AutoCAD zooms to the limits, but also takes into consideration the geometry that's placed outside the limits. And of course, to toggle the Snap to Grid function on and off, we can use the Snap switch in the status bar, or just press F9. And this concludes our lesson about working with the grid in AutoCAD.